Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 516 of the Constructive Criticism Podcast. I'm your host, Heezy, and I got the wrong logo on my jersey.
Is that the wrong logo?
Yeah, I wanted the one where the name is at the top. So
still looks good though.
Thank you. This was gonna be my DC jersey, but we're gonna buy one with the logo where I want it. I'm joined by Abraham, as you can see on the screen. I put your full name in the show this week in the overlay this week, Abe.
Oh wow, I've gone fully professional now.
Abraham. You know, it was funny. I was thinking about podcast intros because I sometimes do that because I like to make a joke or whatever, and I almost called you Abe Himian at the beginning of the show, just because I was laughing about like nicknames that I could give you that are ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you have a nickname from your family?
Not really.
Dude, I have so many.
My brother calls me Aber for Abraham. How I'd mispronounce my own name instead of Abraham.
I was gonna say, isn't the R in another? Wait, you mispronounced your own name?
Instead of being pronounced ABER, which is like the incorrect spelling and like an incorrect spelling incorrect. It's ABRA, but I would always just like as a child swap like the B and R could not sit next to each other.
So it's a you thing that you did.
Yeah, it was a thing that I did, and some people do. I mean, I think it's just dialectical. Like I think people just like some people pronounce it one way, some pronounce the other. When I was like 5, I would say that, and so
isn't the Book of Abraham a book in the Bible?
He's the guy. Religions are Abrahamic.
Why don't okay. Fun note on this before we move on. My wife and I would always say "guys" to our kids, like when they were in the backseat of the car. Like, "Come on, guys, let's go, guys." She thought that was Maxwell's name for the first like year and a half of her life. So she would talk to Maxwell and call him guys. He'd be like, "My name is not Guys, it's Maxwell." But it was so funny. Like, my wife and I laugh about it all the time. But she eventually learned his name. That's an always improving moment for her. She now calls him Maxwell. Let's talk about always improving. It's the point of the show, Abe. And you're up first this week. What did you do to be always improving this week?
Yeah, so my always improving moment actually comes from something that I have started doing a lot more and like more consciously, because it's actually been working for it's like how my girlfriend has done things for a long time in terms of just making sure she gets things done. And I've become a to-do list person in the last week, really, especially at work. Just like a lot of tasks floating around, and also, just like for those who don't know, I work in retail branch management at a bank. So like I could have like 7 or 8 different customer requests. I could have my own things I need to do, follow-up calls to make, like I can have a very long to-do list in a day, and I was finding that I was kind of getting lost in the tasks that seemed most important, but like would cause me to forget other things. So at kind of looking around at how people around me with similar workloads, my girlfriend is a grad student and, has a ton of things she does outside of her job for her union, and also just has just a lot going on. She has this phrase that she uses and is like on her desk on a note that just says, "You'll feel better with an emptier to-do list." And I've seen her just scribble out a to-do list and then just start crossing off through the day, and that's how she gets things done. And at first I was like, this won't work for me. Like I'm skeptical of this. Because like, what, I'm going to put it down on a piece of paper and I'm going to look at it over and over again and just like do it. And I was pretty hesitant to that because I've always been someone who just kind of uses like goes pretty freeform. But I was thinking about, and because it was starting to become a problem, I was falling behind on a lot of things at work that really mattered. And I was thinking about Magic in terms of like, okay, how do I like focus on all the problems I have in Magic? Like when I'm playing a game, how am I able to track all these things, but I can't track like all these things at work? And then I realized that in Magic, often there is a board state keeping me honest. And when it clicked for me that like, okay, I'll use the to-do list as my snapshot of the board state on all these things and just keep on doing that and kind of gamifying it to me in a way to make it like more appealing. It's actually really helped me make sure to get things done. It's a process that's really working, and like something that I'm just going to start incorporating into more and more of my other things in life too. So like, becoming a to-do list person when it comes to organizing my logistics for upcoming event, or like making sure I have the cards I need, or like matchups I need to test, or what I want to get done in a week. Just like starting to do that, as it just has been more and more to manage the busier I get. So
I love it. Before having Maxwell, before my first kid, I was always had a notepad of things to do for the podcast, of things to do for the network, of things to do in Magic, and then also every day at the end of work, I would make a to-do list for tomorrow. Hey, like make sure you get this stuff done so that you do have time to do your other things. So that's really interesting. I if I was going to give you some advice, Abe, it is to make a list that matches a reasonable pace, because I think that you're a little bit like me and you might overload yourself with a to-do list between Magic and work and life. And I personally got really burned by that.
yeah, I keep my to-do lists pretty separate. And like I said, I haven't brought it into a lot of my home space stuff. A part of that is because I have been, like, thankfully, we have I have a gap now where I'm not needing to play RCQs. I have a bit of time to kind of collect myself. My birthday's coming up this week. I've got like a lot of things going on. Yeah, a lot of things going on that keep me from being really, really bogged down in the thick of things. So I'm not
how
sure.
old are you for the listeners? How old are you going to be?
I'm turning 29. So
made me feel old, Abe. I know that we're the boomers.
I was trying to say.
Here's the thing, man. I know that we're the boomers on the podcast because Mason's, just a little baby guy that like didn't play Magic as long as us. But it's funny to think that like, well, I was playing Magic at like 21. You were playing Magic at like 16, 17.
Yeah. I've been around a deceptively long amount of time. I was there at the dawn of time, a wee lad. But no, yeah, I do definitely think, like, I've even found that at work, like, I have a lot of things that are like revolving door tasks.
Yeah.
And I am not assigning myself, like, those things are assigning themselves due dates where it's like, okay, I have like customer inquiries.
Have you used, sorry, this is like so deep for this always improving segment, but have you used Trello before?
I have used Trello before on recommendation of a friend of mine when we were organizing a small 5-person, no, it was a 4 or 5-person team effort. I think it was a 4-person team effort, actually, between myself, Kane Reinhardt,
Okay.
Evan Whitehouse.
I know all of these people.
Yeah. Evan Buchholz, who is a good friend of mine.
I know that one.
He won he lost the finals of the Eldrazi Winter GP.
I think for what it's worth, that like I personally have found personal Trello boards, or even like podcast Trello board. Like Trello is like Kanban's like the greatest thing ever invented. So if you're like, hey, I want to maximize these to dos, make yourself a Trello board.
Yeah. I think where I might fall into the pitfall you're warning me about is where I have my own tasks that I'm assigning my own deadlines on, because those are things where, like, that's the hardest part for me to manage. So if I were to assign, like, I might tighten my deadlines too much. But
sure.
As I get to that, you'll hear about it in Always Improvement segment in the future. So enough of work productivity talk, Spencer. What was your Always Improvement?
Hey, you know what though? Like, I've used things like to-do lists and Trello boards and like that type of stuff for Magic a lot. Like, one of the things that I think that this segment has done throughout the years that we've done it, it's I think it's 7, almost on 8 years now that we've done this segment, is that using the things that you do in Magic, or using the things that you do in personal or professional life, and applying them other places is like the way to maximize gains, right? And so, you're talking about what you're doing at work, but then you immediately talked about how you were going to apply that to Magic. So I took I obviously talked last week how I took a huge break, like the longest break I've legitimately taken from like any games of Magic in a long time, like a full like 8 or 9 days. Like I'm way more likely to just log into Arena or Magic Online or just like talk about stuff than that is normally. This week I looked at some standard decks that and seeing like what rotates from those standard decks and like what type of things cards need. And we have a Patreon question about this that we won't answer today because I think that we might do that in another episode. But like, that's one of the things that I like to do is like, what is this deck losing? And like, as an example, Rule Prowess is a standard deck that loses Kamano. And if you play it, the green red double check land, I don't even remember the name of the card. And that's it. That's all it loses. Like, it doesn't lose anything else. And most of them don't even play that check land. So, yeah, so you lose the slow lands if you play them, and then you lose Kamano. I think it's Kamano. That's it. Like, and what's so funny is that some of the decks don't even play that. They play Scrap. The one that you can
the like thing that flings itself.
Yeah, what's it called? Is it
Furnace
Scamp? Thank you.
Yeah,
Furnace Scamp. So like
Company Scamp, one of those scamps.
Yeah, so like it doesn't lose that much. There are other decks though, like you're looking at like, let's say that you're like a big green black guy, or you're like a big. I mean, you like Domain, for example. It doesn't exist after this. Like you're donezo. Like, and kind of looking at like what this can help you get a level 0 of like, okay, here are the things that have cards that are supported already that don't lose a lot. What does level 0 look like? And I think the reason that I do this is I think a lot about the Delver decks of yesteryears in Standard, and how Brad Nelson, I love you. I'm trying to throw you under the bus, but like Brad Nelson was like, oh, like it doesn't really matter if you lose. I think it was Preordained at the time. I can't remember if it was Preordained or Ponder. Was it Ponder?
Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever the new cantrip is will be fine. It doesn't matter if you lose Vapor Snag, Unsummon will be fine. And that just wasn't true. Like the difference between Ponder and the next cantrip and Vapor Snag and Unsummon was way too much for that deck to overcome. And so kind of looking at like, okay, what is level 0 of this archetype that already exists look like? And then, okay, what are the reasonable things left of the archetypes that we see that the holes are fillable, right? So like green red ramp in Standard is a deck that did really well during the RC season. Hasn't seen any play since. Guess what? That deck loses basically nothing. Like, actually could be one of the great decks of the next format. And like Domain could set the tempo for like what a big mana deck looks like in the format. And so that's kind of what I've been thinking about and doing, kind of with some friends, just talking about.
Yeah, I think that's really important. There's an article that I wrote for Star City that I really liked writing, which was just, at the time, I was looking into like Guilds of Ravnica tier 2 standard decks around rotation, like things that were like on the fringes that would like, top 16 or like, whatever, a Sunday event, or like, top 32 the open, like whatever rogue deck, and be like, okay, like when things change in the format, these are the decks that really you should be looking at, because there's probably like the reason the best decks are usually because they're playing the best cards, right? Yeah. And if their best cards are rotating, like you're saying, like Domain is not going to be able to exist, right? So many of the key pieces of Domain are going to be gone. But, the decks that maybe were crowded out by Domain's existence, like the ramp deck, in some vein.
No, that actually has a good Domain matchup for what it's worth.
Well, it has a good Domain matchup because it's kind of mirror breaking Domain, but it's in the same lane as Domain.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
With there's opportunity there for like a different deck to operate in the same space now that you're removing, kind of finding, okay, what's not going to be viable anymore. Well, and kind of what cards are viable really dictates that. So,
and you think about things like I know that like we haven't talked about standard a long time on this podcast, but like Orzhov mid range turned out to like be really good in standard for the challenges and things. And this is basically like the mono white deck from I don't know how long ago, but like doing that black splash that people started to do later. I know that Sandblock did like a Boros slash at the RC and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, what are the top decks doing? Like, how are they doing it? And you think about things like we don't go too deep, but like Golgari mid range, the like low end of that deck, like the cheap stuff, all staying around, right? So like, it might not be like the big end, the big stuff that Golgari mid range was doing at the beginning, but like, dude, we watched that deck like dominate worlds for no reason. Like, it should have lost many matchups that it won, and has always been held down by the fact that domain existed. And the cheap stuff it's all staying around.
Nothing beats rock.
Especially not paper. That's going to do it for Always Improving this week. Let's move on to our Patreon shoutouts. Every week on the show, we want to shout out our newest patron. Michael joined at the $5 tier, which gets access to the Discord, which gets access to the live shows, all of the specialness that comes with $5, where most of our patrons hit. Shout out to Michael. Thank you so much. And honestly, like, it every time I get that notification, it's like, oh, you have a new patron at this level. I'm like, heck yeah. Heck freaking yeah.
Oh yeah, it's the best news.
Let's do some housekeeping. We're going to just talk really quickly about our sponsor, untap.gg. Just use the link in the show notes. Sign up. Do it. I know so many of you play Arena. I know, because you talked to me about it. And you're like, Spencer, you're an Arena grinder. Tell me about this, and this in Explorer. And I'm like, okay, but also, just sign up for untap.gg. I promise it's worth it. They give you, I believe the beginning even gives you free access to the like limited stuff and things like that. So check it out. It's definitely worth it.
And if you're a skeptic, Bloomburrow's about to come out. Not
Do
a better
right
time
then.
to try
Do
them
it
when
right
no one
then.
knows what the cards are, and you got to go back and read them half the time anyway.
You get a Channel Fireball rating. You get literally LSV's rating from his Channel Fireball article directly posted on your cards. It's definitely worth it. And then the other way to support the show is the swag store. We haven't talked about this in a while, and I don't know why this dropped off of our show notes, but if you want like a desk mat with like this logo on it, or you want a water bottle, you want a life pad, you want a t-shirt, that's always available in the swag store. Just head on over to constructivism.com, hit swag, you're there.
Swag.
All right, trading grounds. Every week on the show, we either have a main topic or trading grounds. Trading grounds are typically those type of episodes that are applicable to more than just what's going on right now, what the flavor of the week is. It is like, let's talk about something more evergreen. Today, Abe, this is actually your training grounds. This is something that you came up with, and I wanted to let you take away game planning in ABCs.
Yeah, so, we all know our ABCs, I would hope. At this point, if you're playing Magic, you can probably read a few words. There's many on the cards. But, where this came from, and this whole idea of like ABCs and game planning and also a bit in deck building, came from working with one of the people I've been coaching just on understanding macro games a bit better. Really thinking about how to improve the quality or start to pare down the amount of options in front of you, and developing the ability to think ahead in games. And I realized in kind of trying to talk through what they were thinking about, and where they were at, and how to kind of bridge the gap there in terms of their understanding. This framework that really I have to give credit to Michael Jacob. He wrote an article back in the 2010s around some of the the peak of his Magic career, just about the idea of, an A plan, a B plan, and a C plan in every deck. And Autumn Burchett also quoted this, I think, in their Pro Tour winning article, like one of their articles after winning the Pro Tour that they were on Star City. I remember kind of reconnecting with the idea at that time too. And it's really, I think, just having this framework. I've realized through talking about this with this client of mine in coaching, and also just have benefited from this a lot in the last few years. I've really been learning a lot of new decks, and the formats have changed so much. And especially, like, I think around Modern Horizons 2 playing Hammer, this was like one of the biggest breakthroughs for me in understanding how the deck really functioned. Is just understanding, how decks work on their A plan, their B plan, and their C plan. I think that if you understand this, it can really unlock a lot of tools for not only thinking about your decisions in game, but also in deck building, out of game. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to talk about this one today.
I love it. And also, I think that the idea, we often talk about like what your deck is trying to do. And I don't know that we ever get this deep, right? Like we don't ever, I we'll probably talk about this in examples, but I have an example of like ramp decks that I think people like there are lots of different deck types that people are like, oh, well, what do I do once this part fails? Right? And they don't know what to do from there. And thus their game plan falls apart. And I think this episode will help a lot of those people.
Yeah. And I mean, to just really dive into it, what do we mean by like an A, B, C plan? What do I mean by ABCs? So really, kind of like you were alluding to, Spencer, what do you do when a plan fails, and what is it your deck is trying to accomplish? When we talk about that, that can be great to say, where it's like, okay, yeah, what is my deck trying to do? But defining that, I know for a lot of people, if they're not used to it or they don't really know how to do it, it can be hard to even start in terms of what is my deck trying to do. I'm picking up this deck, I'm playing it for the first time, or I'm reading the deck list on MTG Goldfish. What is it that the deck I'm looking at is trying to do? And so this is really a framework that allows you to break it down into, what is the plan A, the plan B, and the plan C. And for this purpose, what I mean by plan A is really like what a deck is built to do. Let's think about what its best draws are, uninterrupted. What is the powerful thing it's assembled to do? What is the reason to play the deck? What is my plan A draw? And this could be,
Can I give you one?
Yeah, sure, go for it.
Yeah, I'm going to go turn one. I'm going to play the wonderful thing that is, we'll say, I don't know, Blackleaf Cliffs. Untap. We're going to Thought Seize you. Just take
Okay.
whatever. Whatever it is. Turn two, we're going to play an untapped land of black and red variety. We're going to play the wonderful thing that is Bloodtithe Harvester.
Okay, that's a good one.
Yeah, so now, like, if you have a creature that's going to hit the board, I can get rid of it. And then turn three, we're just going to play Sorin. With any land. It doesn't actually matter what the land is. And then we're going to minus it and put Vein Ripper into play. There you go.
Yeah, that's a great plan A.
Yeah.
Like Sorin plus Vein, that's an amazing plan A. And I think it's really great that you laid it out even turn by turn there. Because when you think about plan B, let's say you do Thought Seize your opponent, and they don't have a piece counter magic at that time, or don't have an answer to your Sorin or Vein Ripper. You do your thing, and then you're going to cast that Sorin, and they kill it, or they counter it. You go and make that Vein Ripper, and they exile it. Or you have the Sorin, you don't have the Vein Ripper, whatever it is, the pieces aren't together. This is where, like, what's plan B? Your plan A, things didn't go exactly as you'd love them to. How does your deck operate, and what is it that your deck tries to accomplish? What cards is your deck leaning on in order to accomplish a game plan that works once this A plan hasn't worked? That's really the B plan. And then the C plan is really, I think, what Mason describes most often as fail rate. talked about creatures have a really high fail rate. We've really beaten that drum a few times on the show. But when you've been interacted with and picked apart, your deck isn't really functioning, it's kind of floundering, it doesn't have the cards it wants to have. How is it able to still function? The draws haven't lined up. What is it you're still able to do? And I think of this as kind of like, as opposed to the B plan here with vampires being, okay, well, maybe I didn't have Sorin Vein Ripper, but I had Fable the Mirror Breaker, and I
Yes.
have this Blood Tithe Harvester, and I have Thoughtseize my opponent, so I'm still playing good
Yeah.
mid-range game. That's a wonderful plan.
Yeah.
Right. Your plan B is in line with the best mid-range deck prior to discovering this other plan.
I agree. And what's so funny to me is like you see lists that like maybe they're playing like Dust Legion Zealot in this world that we're talking about, right? This vampires deck. And one of the newer innovations of this deck is to play Caustic Bronco in that slot to talk about what you talk about, like how creatures have a little bit, like eventually, like if you don't answer a Caustic Bronco, that you're just going to die anyway. Like you will just, the opponent will just lose. And, they're going to lose either the card advantage or the fact that, like, you're able to not crew it, it's saddle it or whatever. And I think of like deck building in the terms of this A plus B plus C, right? Where it's like, okay, I could play Dusk Legion Zealot. It actually probably fits my A plan the best. Like, to be honest, if like Sorin is my A plan, I want as many vampires in my deck as possible. But if I'm only going to play 2 Dust Legion Zealot, and I want a card that draws me cards that fits my overall game plan between A plus B and C, maybe I want Caustic Bronco in that slot to really fuel the fire.
And even more so than that, you could look at it as saying, like, if you think Sorin plus whatever random vampires or mutavaults you have lying around, I think that really is a C plan scenario. When it's just Sorin and like a Dust Legion Zealot, a Mutavault, maybe a Hive of the Eye Tyrant, you're just kind of like, you're scrapping with what you got. Caustic Bronco is much more, it's still just about as good at scrapping with what you've got in your C plan games, because it's a card that demands an answer. If both players are on low resources, it's a good threat to have because it'll start to pull you ahead. If, in your B plan, if it's your 2-drop that you play, it means that your Fable the Mirror Breaker or whatever your non-Sorin Vein Ripper follow-up is still going to be really good. And it only hurts in your A plan where it's like, I have the Sorin and I need vampires, like everything's churning. So I think it's a really good example of like not only how it applies to game planning in play, like for you, for your opponent, like thinking about what your opponent's doing, but it also really, really like applies in deck building. I think that like, and this applies not only from, deck building in Constructed, this applies to deck building in Limited. And I think it's no surprise that I think one of the things that Michael Jacob does most often now is he just plays a lot of and talks a lot about Sealed. It's format he plays the most on Magic Online. And I think that, if you've never, checked him out or seen what he does, I think he does have a very good philosophy on Sealed I've learned a lot from, because it follows a lot of this framework. He thinks about, what is it the individual cards are doing in the games where things aren't just, I played a 2-drop, a 3-drop, a 4-drop on curve. And I think that, as you apply that back to anything in terms of like, how is it I'm constructing the deck? How do the cards actually dictate the game that's going to be played? It becomes really, really helpful
It's so funny because people love draft because of the agency that it gives you. But if you had asked me my best format before I had kids, I always had Sealed. Like it was always, and it was like, what is my deck trying to do? Like, and kind of answering that question. I have a question about this kind of philosophy for you, Abe, because, this is kind of your thing, but like, what do you do when you have a deck like, I don't know, let's say like Amalia, to stay with Pioneer? Like, obviously your game plan is to combo off, but like, do you really have an A, B, and C with a deck like this?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's probably another great example how this is. I mean, combo decks like Amalia, if you think about it, what's their plan A, right? Plan A is to assemble your combo, go off, gain a bunch of life, get a huge Amalia, wipe the board, hopefully attack with it and kill your opponent. Like that's plan A, is assemble your combo. Plan B, let's say your combo gets interrupted. They answer your Amalia, they answer your Wild Growth Walker, they, have some sort of hate piece. That's where you start to play more of a mid-rangey creature game. You have your Skyclave apparitions and your to answer hate cards. You've got Return of the Ranks to answer removal spells. You've got Collect Company to find you redundancy, or Court of Calling to find you the right card. Court of Calling more of a plan A card, really, though. It finds the specific card you need that time when you really think about it, because it's just trying to make sure you do the right thing, the number one thing. But I think Return of the Ranks specifically is a huge plan B for the deck. It's probably like its plan A and plan B are so strong. I think it really dictates why the deck is so good. And then your plan C is like, okay, well, I'm not going to be able to combo off. All of my plan B avenues are shut off, really. Like, or my combo avenues shut off. Sword doesn't do anything. Now I'm just, all right, I've got some Soul Wardens, and I've got my Amalia, and I've got my creatures, and I'm attacking. This is I'm beaten down. This is the creatures have a high fail rate thing based.
Yeah, I love this. I'm going to talk about the person that popularized Sentinel of the Nameless City in the deck, Adam Brace from the RC, local player to me. He and his team think the card sucks. Like, they just shouldn't have played it. However, Collected Company becoming the C plan for this deck, just being a good Collected Company deck as its C plan, I think lends itself to like cards like that, where it's like, yeah, the cards doesn't do anything in the like it's actually actively bad most of the time. But when you're on your C plan, and the fact that it can technically contribute to your E plan makes it worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to remember that, like, just because a card doesn't, and this is like the whole point of deck building, right? Just a card doesn't make sense in your A plan, right? You have to build your deck and think about your deck in all of the games you'll play with it, not just the ones that go well, right? You want to make sure your deck still works when things go well. You can't have too many things like Sentinel, but in a deck with 4 Collected Company and Quarter Callings and all these things, if this is the way your deck is built, having access to that first thing that not only enables you to have an Explore at the ready for your combo, right? That helps you kind of, if you get back to, okay, plan A, we're kind of stealing the game here by finding a way to reassemble.
Get back to is like really important here in this deck, right? Like, because like, unlike, we talked about vampires, like there's not like getting back to Sorin, right? But like in a deck like this, there's actually like a backtrack. You can be like, or we're back to plan A. We're actually weaving through our plans as the game goes on.
Yes. Yeah, I think, and I mean, to a lesser extent, I think in like vampires, you could say that hard casting Vein Ripper is that way back, right? It's like Vein Ripper's still an amazing card to be putting into play. It's still a very good threat at any stage of the game. The fact that it's almost unbeatable on the third turn of the game. So that's why the whole deck is predicated on the idea of like, this is the best thing to do.
It's absolutely true. And it's why Fable of the Mirror Breaker is so good in that deck, right? Is like, just making those treasure tokens. You're like, I don't know how much you played vampires comparatively, but like, if you attack with like a goblin twice, like you're still gonna win that game, just like you had cast that thing on turn 3.
Oh yeah, I mean you're playing. I mean this is something that I forget where I got this from, but it's like a 6-drop costs not just 2 more mana, but 2 more mana is 2 more cards in order to cast it, right? Generating that mana, a Fable does it. Prolonging the game with all your mid-range tools, having cards like Caustic Bronco that can draw you more lands and draw you more things prolong the game until you get to 6 mana. Those are all really, really valuable things that contribute to getting back to doing the strongest things in your deck. Because usually, and again, talking about specifically the cards that we're thinking about, your best cards are what dictate your plan A. And most decks are built around doing their plan A, so their best cards are what they're built around enabling.
I gotta ask, just because we've talked about combo decks, we've talked about mid-range decks. I want to talk about aggro and control really quick, but like you think about a deck like I don't know Azorius Control and Pioneer. I'm going to stay with Pioneer because it's Pioneer season. It's what is its Plan B just literally attack with manland or Plan C? Sorry, just literally attack with manlands. Is it like it's Plan A is always obviously like just out advantage your opponent, right? Like they're at some point they just have no shot in the game is Plan A. And I know that's annoying for some people, but that is actually what the deck does. Plan B is probably like, you know, take out your strategy with a key card, whether it's a Sunfall or a Farewell or whatever. Like, a Narset plus Days Undoing, like, just actually like shutting you out of the game. But yeah, it's Plan C. Is it like, am I trying to haul? Am I trying to wrestle extinguisher? Like, what is Plan C here?
I mean, I think it depends. If we're talking about like Pioneer Blue White, I think that yeah, I mean, Plan A is to wrangle control the game with your sweepers, resolve like a Teferi or whatever it is. Narset Days and doing could be your Plan A to just pull the game far ahead. Your Plan B is to continue to jockey for Plan A. Kind of, I think Control is kind of unique in that it always is trying to enact the same game, so it's kind of always pushing back to the same place. But if things slip, or you can even look at it as like Control wants to counter all your spells. That's kind of Plan A. No moralize your thing, and then eventually make it so your spells don't matter. Plan B is like you fall behind on board. Let's cast draw spells, try to dig to that wrath to get back to parity, because the cards in the deck should be able to continue to out advantage, even if it has to trade down on resources a few times to get there. And then Plan C is like, yeah, like you're saying, it could be things like, firing up your creature lands and just pressuring the opponent. I think like Snapcaster beats in iterations of like control decks of the past. That's a Plan C of like, hey, this game is not going how I'd like it to. It's not how it's going conventionally I would like it, or I planned it, but I've got this other game plan. I think part of also what's made Control really weak for, maybe the years prior to No More Lies and make disappear really. But those few years has been the fact that it has been a bit inflexible in terms of game plan. It doesn't really have good plans beyond plan
it almost always relied on like really bad counter spells. And then it got
it's a deck that has the least real flexibility ingrained into it. It's all on the same message, so it's pretty rigid in how it's built. And then like unless you have some sort of cheeky way to win in your control deck, kind of like Narset's Days Undoing might do, depending on the kind of game you're playing or what have you, it's very exploitable when everything has to come back to you enacting your Plan A. You're kind of betting on your deck's ability to get there, and if you can't, that makes a liability. What's really made Blue-White Control a strong deck in the last couple of years has been that they have really pushed the things that make that Plan A viable. They've allowed things like No More Lies to enter the format. They've allowed these decks to have really efficient counter magic and deduce really efficient early game card draw that uses their mana. Right? Those things really bolster Plan A for the control deck.
Yeah.
In a way they haven't been in a long time. And so even though maybe it doesn't really have a plan, if you've picked it apart, right?
I think that's why it gets to play like one Farewell, one, of these like game breaking cards, right? That are like, oh, in this matchup, if I play this, I win. That's its Plan B, because its Plan A is to stop everything.
And I think Control is a good example of where this starts to play into, how do I use this beyond just thinking about, the deck that I'm building, the deck that I'm playing, or the deck I'm reading, right? Is when you're playing against Control, when you're playing with Control, when you're sideboarding, you have to think about, let's say you have a card like Hullbreaker Horror, or you have, in other builds it was cards like Dream Trawler, or whatever your kind of
Your
sideboard
big thing is, yeah.
juke plan is, you are now deciding, okay, my plan A is either I'm going to win with this Hullbreaker Horror, and I'm going to play the whole game around eventually I'll find this Hullbreaker Horror and win, right? That could be the case. Or, your plan A is that it's, okay, my regular control game plan will work. If it's not working, maybe I can stick this Hullbreaker Horror and disrupt things enough I get 3 good attacks. Right? How you're using that card is going to dictate what that plan actually is. What the card does is let you have access to those avenues in your game, and in understanding what those are for yourself, you're going to be able to, make better plans, better sideboard plans, better navigate your games better with your own deck. I think that's something people really learn over time, is how to win with their own deck. That's a lot of what experience can mean to a lot of players who play the same deck a lot or the same archetype a lot, is they understand kind of what they're building towards. But if you understand how to read into that based on what you're looking at, and what a lot of really, really talented players do, and a lot of really hardworking players have learned to do, is to identify that without those hours, or to identify what it is their opponent's deck is going to do, right? If you have a lot of format knowledge, you already know what your opponent's plan A, B, and C could be, and then how to prioritize your cards to make sure that you're playing to beat the same stage of the game that they're in, or playing to beat the same plan that they're trying to enact, right? Talking about a deck like Mono Red, a common sideboard strategy for Mono Red is to change from its pre-sideboard game plan A of, I'm going to cast red 1-drops and, haste creatures, I'm going to attack and use my burn spells to finish them off, right? A way that they punish a lot of decks that over-respect that, right? They have too many things that kill the small stuff, is they'll board out all of the small creatures that are really susceptible to those removal spells in order to bring in things that are going to line up better. So they've now changed what their plan A is. Their plan A is now to ride out something like an Urbrask Forge, or to, win with Koth or Chandra.
Yeah.
Their plan B is to kind of, let's say you kill all their stuff, okay, I'll still have enough cards to be operating on the same plan. So I'll be able to apply pressure, just maybe not in the same synergistic way my deck is built to do. Kind of agnostic of that. My plan C is to hopefully draw enough burn spells to kill you, even though I have nothing going on, before you kill me, right? But that shift is allowed by their sideboard, is allowed by the way that they built their deck. And if you're someone who's trying to fix your mono red matchup, and you're still planning for their game 1 plan A, right, you're allowing yourself to get exploited because you're not playing the same game as them. Right, so that's why I really understand.
They made it a resource management game, and you're playing a tempo game. And right,
or it's always a resource management game, right? It's about lining up so that your cards are going to exchange profit.
No, that's a good point.
But they've changed how they plan to use their resources by changing the cards in their deck, or by changing their approach, or playing their cards in a different way. Sometimes Amalia does this all the time too. Amalia could choose that it wants to be a deck that's holding on to its combo pieces to set up to combo in a single turn, when against blue white it could do this, where it's okay, I want to resolve the things all at once so I can at least get my life total up, versus maybe against a deck that doesn't have much spot removal at all, a deck like Lotus, where they just need to combo as fast as possible. They're just throwing their cards on the table and trying to get it.
You talked a little bit about aggro, and I really appreciate that, because I was going to bring up some of the best throwing decks, like Rule Slick Shot, or Is It in Soul. And I think that the things that you said about Mono Red really applied to those decks in a lot of ways. But there's one archetype that we haven't touched on, and it is the redheaded stepchild of Magic archetypes, and that's Tempo. And I want to talk about Spirits right now for a second. Spirits is a Tempo deck in Pioneer. It is probably the only good Tempo deck in Pioneer. I know some of you try to be playing those rogues, but they're not good. And this deck has gotten really weird, for those who don't know. Mono Blue Spirits was really good at the beginning of Pioneer, and it is completely shifted to a hard 2-color deck with a Wedding Announcement, Spell Queller, Skyclave Apparition, like hard 3-drops, and then Wandering Emperor to top out the curve. And my question for you, Abe, is like, your plan A is still the Spirits plan, right? Like, you're still trying to like play cheap things, hit them with No More Lies and Lofty Denial, right? And then your plan B is to do what?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Spirits deck, like, I don't know, I think that being a tempo deck specifically, it's so contextual. I think that it's a good thing to use for an example in these ABCs, right? This is a framework for looking at each individual deck from the card choices,
Right.
and how those play into the format of the other card choices. Right now, the way that the Spirits deck is built, it's leveraging obviously the instant speed interaction of having those cheap counter spells, having really, really efficient, 1-mana threats that present a lot of power in the air, between having Spectral Sailor, there's something with Flash, which really easy to get in play and has, some amount of plan C, potential there in drawing cards. Mausoleum Wanderer, which plays into all of your plans of being a cheap threat that also can disrupt your opponent. And then allowing those plus the right, kind of like a Blue-Eyed Flyers deck in Limited, playing like a bunch of those flying creatures and then chump blocking on the ground, or kind of removing the problematic creatures and winning the race that way. I think it's still a tempo deck. It's just the way that a tempo deck operates in Pioneer now is very different. Rather than being a deck that is the kind of, okay, 1-drop, Curious Obsession, counter every spell tempo deck, where I'm riding this one thing to victory, I think the deck has really shifted to, say that I'm going to get, right, it's going to use 1 or 2 counter spells to counter the very important cards, things like a Cavalier of Thorns, or, right, the Reach creature is really important. Bring the Light, a Sunfall. These are all spells that, like, really, really matter.
Yeah.
To protect like this, but then, getting outraced on the ground, that's not really going to be an option if I have a Wedding Announcement, because that Wedding Announcement is going to give me 3 blockers, or, cards to fight with. If I have 1 or 2 flyers, I'm going to be able to just continue to attack in the air and only answer the cards that matter to that game plan rather than anything else. So I think that while, traditionally the plan A of the Spirit Shell has been Curious Obsession 1-drop, and then the plan B has been, okay, well, I have a lot of spirits, and I have, Supreme Phantoms and Shacklegeist and Spellqueller, and I kind of control that. And then the plan C has been, maybe having some number of Wedding Announcements, or having even things like having the Rattle Chains, not the Shacklegeists, and having, right, those things are okay. So I'm not able to control the spells that have resolved, as well as I'd want to, but I am able to control the things that are in play and try to get attacks across that win the game. Whereas now it's more, let me get things in play, let me amass resources, and then let me continue to chip in damage.
Yeah, the difference between the mono blue deck that was like the really popular deck, right? But like at the very beginning of Pioneer, the one that I personally touted for a long time, and the new version, which you can watch me play on the YouTube channel, is Spellqueller. Might be like the way the format has shaped up. Spellqueller became like, okay, we're not going to play. I mean, you talked about like the number of counter spells the mono blue deck play. Like it was like a lot. It was you like all of those 4 Spellquellers for other stuff. All of the Wandering Empires were either protection spells or counter spells. And now it's like, okay, well, I don't need to protect my stuff because I'm not like a Curious Obsession deck, but I still need to disrupt you. And I think that this deck is one. I wanted to mention that it was doing well in the context of the ABC plan, but I also think that it has a really good ABC plan. Like it's a plan of like, can you beat like 3 flyers? That's like a real A plan. Like, can you?
And if I Rattle Chain one of them, like, can you do you have 4 spells? Like, exactly. Giant is nowhere to be seen these days. Do you have the material?
And it's B plan of like, okay, can you beat some flyers plus Wandering Emperor or Wedding Announcement? That's a good B plan. And then like kind of its final game plan of, okay, well, we're just gonna like remove your important stuff. All we care about is your, and maybe that's the B plan. The B and the C could probably be switched in some cases, but like, I don't know. I think as I read this episode, I thought a lot about Pioneer and how, while the format isn't the greatest Magic format of all time, the decks do this. Like the good decks do this. So
Yeah, and I think, I think it's also like just thinking about how this framework of thinking can really apply to understanding those changes, right? Like the spirits hive mind all decided, what's not working? Our plan A. Our plan A is not good. We need to scrap it. We need to go back to the drawing board. What is the plan A we can win with? And that plan A is okay. If we have enough to work with, right, kind of a post sideboarded version of the deck that's not all in on this stuff, with all the fatal pushes running around and everything, let's just try to be a bit, tricky and have some counter magic and have flying creatures. Maybe that'll work. And it is, right? So by adapting that, changing the plan A, then you just need to make plans B and C that follow and make sure your deck has those. And that really, I think
you're really hitting on our next point, which is like why it's important, right? Is understanding. We talked about rules of engagement a few weeks ago, right? And like if you're not following the rules of engagement, if your plan A doesn't fall into that, you need to adjust.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean if you're not doing something that is respecting the rules of engagement or warping the rules of engagement, right? Like if you, and that's something where you've broken out, right? Like that's introducing Sorin Van Ripper to the mix. That's breaking it. If you're changing the rules of engagement with the deck you're playing, that's something you rarely get to experience. But otherwise, you need to make sure that the plans that your deck has and that the plans that you are going to go into the game knowing that you want to accomplish, that those are within the rules of engagement for the format, for the matchup, for what it is you're trying to do. And it all goes hand in
hand. How does this topic, like if they're going to apply this, like how does it help them as a listener tomorrow?
I mean, the numerous ways that we've mentioned already that it helps you are great ones. Like I said, I've been using this in coaching as a way to kind of get sea legs in terms of thinking about the game that you're playing in terms of these stages. Understanding this framework even exists and that this is a way to think about the deck that you're playing or playing against helps you think, okay, when I'm sideboarding, what are the cards that are important? In what stage of the game am I going to be, trying to win? Where do I need help? Where do I not need help? Right? It gives you a way to kind of parse all of the things you're experiencing into a way to make it actionable in your game, and also to extrapolate that up to, so I think my deck will be good at beating this A plan of theirs. Do I have the B plan covered? Do I have the tools for that? Or is that what I really need to worry about, right? So it starts to give you the way of understanding, like matchups is a great way to think about it. It really is something you can use in many areas of your game to have a stronger foundation of where you're making that decision from.
Early on in the episode, we talked about some of the benefits and how you can apply it to your own process. We talked about, whether you want to play Caustic Bronco or Dust Legion Zealot in Vampires, right? Like that deck building decision of like that. You had talked about sideboarding just now, right? Like of like individually, if I understand my A, B, and C, and I understand my opponent's A, B, and C, how does that help me sideboard accordingly? If I remove this card, like a really good example of this, I think, is Gruul Prowess. Not because like I'm a total, Gruul Prowess lover or whatever, but like, okay, I want up or down on my protection interaction according to their game plan. Like that's a base level. Like that's an A plan. Like that's like, okay, I have 4 in my main, 1 on my side. How many do I want in my main? Like what's the number and which ones do I want? Because I have 3 different spells doing this thing. And it is according to what their removal is, what their game plan is, and when they're going to use that removal. we'll end that game plan, right? And that is how sideboarding works. Like that's how you identify those things. And then also like kind of thinking about, okay, well, let's say that we both just get each other, or just both of us have understood each other. We're both in this like land of we understand what the person's trying to do, and now it's about, okay, what's next? What is the thing that's going to win this game? Not all the games, not the matchup, but what is going to win this game? And how does it win this game? And I think that's what the C plan really comes into play, Abe.
Yeah, I mean, I think a really good illustration of that we didn't really get to touch on, but we kind of glossed over is like, how does this help you in your decisions, right? Like, if you are playing against mono red and their C plan is maybe I'll run a lightning strike off the top, maybe I'll draw that burn spell, right? Maybe even though they've killed all my creatures and I'm hellbent, maybe I'll sneak a hit in and then I'll draw running burn spells, right? Knowing that and knowing that that's right, knowing on your end, I need to play a game that gets to that stage to win. Going into that, you need to prioritize your life total, right? You're able to correctly evaluate how important is this resource? How important is that resource comparatively to each other, right? Because going into it that at a stage of the game I know I will be in, that is what matters most to them. I need to make sure it's as hard for them as possible, even if it means giving up some cards or some efficiency in my plays to make sure that at that moment I have what I need. Right? It's so much bigger than just, this is how I understand, the macro game. This is how I understand, the decks I'm looking at. This is how I parse the format. It really is a part of everything. And like, I don't know. This is part of my Frank's Red Hot of Magic. Those commercials where I put that bleep on everything. It's like there is not a place in Magic where you couldn't convince me that starting to think about things in this way wouldn't be helpful to coming to a good decision. And I think that's really why it stood the test of time for now, more than a decade, maybe even like close to 15 years of like being an accepted part of Magic theory that has helped some of the absolute best players in the world, like Autumn, go on to win Pro Tours. Yeah. So
that is going to do it for the training grounds. Abe, thank you so much for those who don't know. Like, we do these episodes. We plan these episodes ahead, and we try to figure out like what we want to talk about. And this was Abe's brainchild, and I had an absolute blast. So thank you,
Mason. This is a banger without you. This goes out to you, Mason. This is a CCMTG banger, an all timer.
Well, let's talk about bangers, because our next Patreon question from Nick is: what episodes would you recommend as required listening? I have a few.
Okay, do you want to
pause?
The question says episode.
Wait.
So, but
we only get one?
I'm willing.
We only get one?
I'm willing to allow 2 honorable mentions.
Okay.
Because I also have some.
Okay, I'm going to let you go first as the new guy.
Okay. So that's really funny to say after doing this for 3 years.
Yeah. You're the new guy. It's fine.
I am still the newest guy. So I will say my number 1 I would recommend as required listening is the episode we did with guest host Alexander Hain. I think that episode with Hain was an absolute banger of an episode. Material-wise, it really expanded some ways that I was thinking about Magic at the time. It was a lot to chew on. It's something that I still think about sometimes in terms of just like how great it was to do that interview and how insightful it was. And then my honorable mentions are Lateral Thinking 1 and 2. I think that those are a really, really good pair of things about your own improvement, your own development as a player, and also just something I'm very personally passionate about, and hearing it through mine and Spencer's varied perspectives and our approaches to the same thing. I think it's a really, really valuable pair of episodes.
That made my heart so full. For those who don't know, when I joined the show, I was like, Abe, what guests do you want? Like, you can pick any guest. I promise to get them on the show. And Abe says to me, I want Alexander Hayne. And what's so funny is we had done an episode with Alexander Hayne, but our mic was terrible on that episode. I was like, dude, we should totally get Alex back on. And it was an emotional episode for me and Alex because of some stuff, but also like it was so good.
It was a really good one.
Okay, so the first one is episode 428. It is Improving at MTG with Jesse Rockin. I was not on this episode. I think it is literally the best episode of CCMG that I was not on. I could not believe how well Jesse communicated, and like I was listening to that episode. I could not turn it off. I was like, I don't care what else I have going on. Like this is like how to improve at Magic the Gathering, and I thought it was unbelievable. So that's episode 428 for what it's worth. Total bias here. Episode 478, Team Fundies in MTG. I think that we established what fundamentals are for you so that you don't have to worry about it. And you should listen to that episode just like I read Duke's level 1 articles every year. Like I think that it is a required listening every year. Not because like you're gonna forget, but just to remind yourself of kind of like what that looks like. And then my third one is kind of harder. I think maybe this one.
This is a banger.
I really loved this episode. And like how we were able to apply it across so many archetypes in a current format. I really loved this episode. I'm gonna say this one.
That's high praise. I feel honestly, I feel like the first, not the first, but the first or second, one of the first like 3 episodes I've really taken the full reins on pitch to record. I'm taking that home with me tonight.
Well, to be fair, the other one I was going to suggest was a cheating answer. I was going to say the archetype series. I think is like
one episode.
It's not one episode
series.
It's not one episode, but it's so good. It's on the YouTube, by the way. If you want to just listen to the archetype series, Abe. If people want to join the conversation, the best way to do that is to join the Patreon Discord. There's a public Discord for Heezy Game Media. That's Heezy. That's this show. That's Neat Nerd. That's all the stuff under that umbrella. But the Patreon Discord was popping today. I don't know if you saw how active it was, but it's really cool to see people talking about Magic, loving Magic. And then the YouTube comments is a great way to support the show. In all honesty, it is probably the best way currently to support the show. If you are watching or listening on YouTube and you can leave a comment of any kind, it helps the algorithm so much compared to like the other things. So, Abe, you weren't on the episode, but a few weeks ago, one of our patrons was like, what's the best platform to listen to the show? And it's like, well, if you're going to listen from start to finish, like you're literally just going to press play and listen to the whole thing or watch the whole thing. It's definitely YouTube. It's not even close.
Hit that red arrow.
Yeah, it's not close. And then you can follow us on Twitter at CCMTG, or if you want to follow Abe, you can do it at.
You can follow me at twitter.com/morenothings. My DMs are still open for coaching. I have just about 1 spot to fill. So please don't hesitate to reach out about that. And otherwise, yeah, I don't know. It's really just Twitter for me these days.
You can follow me at Heezy Game on X or Twitter. You can listen to me. We did finally get a new record time, and things are settling down for Need to Nerd Pod. So I'm going to be doing that every week again. And yeah, from there, like, just follow Mason at Mason E. Clark. Mason is not here today. He's currently at the Tolarian College, and we miss him. But yeah, we love you, man. Did I say that right? Is the Tolarian? Is it?
Tolarian Community College, which for the patrons who are listening to the early release and full episode, that's going to be really, really full circle, as everyone was talking about college for a bunch.
That's so funny. All right. And that is going to do it for this week. Thank you everybody so much. We'll see y'all next week with another episode of CCMTG.